Hey guys, we are moving on to a new unit. We are going to be taking a look at ecology, and so this is our intro chapter where we start talking about ecology and the biosphere. So ecology is the study of interactions between organisms and their environment. And when we talk about organisms, we're talking about all living things. So we could be looking at the very microscopic level of bacteria all the way up to, entire forests and how they are working together. Um, so the different levels of ecology that we can study: organismal ecology, so we're looking at the actual organism; population ecology, so we're looking at groups of individuals of the same species that live together; community ecology, when you're looking at all living things within an area that live together; the ecosystem ecology, landscape ecology, and then finally global ecology. So you guys can get more definitions and examples from your book. So we want to talk a little bit about distribution of species. And distribution of species is going to be limited by the interactions between the organisms and their environment. So when we talk about environment, what exactly are we talking about? Well, we tend to break this up into two different classes. We look at abiotic factors, which are the non-living factors, so things like temperature, the amount of light, amount of water, nutrient availability; and then biotic factors, which are going to be the effects of other organisms. So those examples would be things like competition and predation. So again, abiotic factors are the non-living things, so temperature, water, salinity, sunlight, rocks and soil, wind, and disturbance all fall into the category of abiotic factor. So temperature is really important because it affects biological processes. So when things are cold, cells can rupture because they can expand while freezing. When the temperature gets too hot, you tend to see protein starting to denature above 45 degrees Celsius. So life can only exist over a fairly narrow temperature range, and so that's why temperature is so important. The next is water. So we did a whole chapter on water in the beginning of the year, so you should definitely review that if you don't remember the properties of water. But cells have to maintain a correct water potential to keep from exploding or drying out, and so water is really important. Salinity is going to be the salt concentration, and this affects osmotic potential and water balance. So most aquatic organisms are limited by their ability to osmoregulate, or to regulate the saline or salt levels. Sunlight provides energy for photosynthesis, which drives most food webs. And plants often compete for light because of shading or absorption of light by deep columns of water. We've got rocks and soil. So this is a physical structure. Soil can have different pH levels, which will allow different types of plants to grow. You have mineral composition of rocks, and soil limit where plants can grow. Um, and then it's really important to know that the soil limits what plants can grow where, and then the plants will then limit what animals can be found in an area. So soil doesn't seem that important, but because it controls the plants that it can be found in an area, and then the plants control the animals or can limit the animals, it's actually very important. Next, we've got wind, and wind affects temperature and water conditions for many organisms. It can also carry abrasive particles that limit plant growth. And then we also have disturbance. And so disturbance is often an important part of an environment. Um, and depending on what kind of environment you're in, you're going to see different types of disturbances. And disturbance often allows organisms to recolonize an area after a disturbance happens. So you've got things like fire, strong winds, you could have hurricanes or flooding or volcanoes, any of these things. And it's also really important to keep in mind that humans cause disturbance as well. Next, we're going to talk about climate. So climate shapes environments and what organisms can live in a particular area. And it does so because the different climates will have different temperatures or amounts of precipitation, availability of sunlight, and wind. And so we tend to look at climate patterns globally. And so global climate patterns are determined largely by solar energy and then also the movement of heat across the planet. And so we've got ocean currents that help carry heat through water. And so you can see here the orange is going to be the warm water currents, the blue is showing the cool water currents. We also have wind patterns. And so you have a few things that are going to affect climate. So the solar radiation and latitude, the axis tilt of the Earth, and then the seasons that are caused, and then the water and air circulation patterns. So solar radiation and latitude essentially changes the amount of light and energy that's delivered per surface area. So if you live close to the equator, you're getting direct overhead sunlight almost constantly. And then the further north and the further south you move from the equator, you are changing the angle at which the light is hitting the earth. And so you have a much lower angle of incoming sunlight. So the result then is that the poles receive less light, the equator receives more light, and then this unequal heating causes air and water to circulate. We also have different seasons on Earth, and this is caused by the Earth's tilt. We also know that the day length changes over time, and that many organisms are going to be restricted in range by how well they adapt to the changing seasons. So here, that's what we're looking at, are the changing seasons. So you've got the March equinox, the June solstice, September equinox, and then the December solstice. And so what you can see here is that the tilt of the Earth is kind of playing a role in terms of you can see like when different hemispheres are tilted sort of closer to the Earth versus further away. And then we've got global air patterns. So air rises when it's heated and then it sinks when it's cooled. And so you've got different zones of rising and sinking that are created. And then you also have Earth's rotation, which causes the zones to twist. And so that's what you're looking at here. So you have these convection currents, or this idea that the hot air rises and the cool air sinks. That happens all over the globe, all over the earth. And then because you have the tilt and the rotation, you cause all of these different wind patterns. So you've got the different air circulation patterns. These will affect rainfall patterns. So areas where you tend to see rising air will be wet areas, and then descending air would be dry areas. So your lecture question for today is, how exactly do abiotic factors affect biotic factors? So how do these non-living factors that we talked about affect the living things? All right, don't forget to send me an answer with the lecture question. Thanks, guys.